Hey everybody, this is So Heidi, and you're listening to the Successful Fashion Designer Podcast. We all know that the fashion industry is brutally competitive and it takes loads of hard work to get ahead. The problem is that everyone's secretive and tight-lipped about their ways. After working as a designer and educator for over a decade, I wanted to help break down those barriers and bring you valuable knowledge from industry experts, and this show is exactly where you'll find that. Whether you're trying to break into the fashion world, make yourself more marketable, launch your own label, or become a successful freelancer, we'll help you get ahead in the cutthroat fashion industry. This is episode 45 of the Successful Fashion Designer Podcast, and today I'm chatting with Kristen Walther, a fashion photographer who works with indie and established brands in the New York City area. Kristen walks us through the entire photo shoot process step by step and shares her best advice on how to plan for a successful day, the difference between lookbook and campaign shoots, and the importance of casting models in real life. She's seen her fair share of horror stories and shoots gone wrong. Kristen and I laughed so hard throughout this episode at all of these stories. I know you're going to love them. And most of them happen when this essential step of casting your models in real life gets skipped. Just like this time.
We all show up to set and there's this older lady that's there and this like younger girl and she's like, hi, yeah, this is my daughter so-and-so and from Model Mayhem. And I was like, what? and the girl smiles and she's got braces.
I know you're going to enjoy hearing all of Kristen's advice and some of her hysterical stories. This honestly was one of the episodes I've laughed the most on so far, so get ready for some good chuckles. As always, make sure to hit subscribe on iTunes or wherever you're listening. And if you enjoy the show, I'd be thrilled if you'd take 30 seconds to leave a rating or review on iTunes. It really helps out, and I appreciate each and every one of you. You can do that anytime at sfdnetwork.com/review. Now, on to the interview with Kristen. To access the show notes for today's episode, visit sfdnetwork.com/45. Welcome, Kristen, to the Successful Fashion Designer Podcast. Can you please introduce yourself and tell everybody what you do in the fashion industry?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me, Heidi. I'm Kristen Walther, photographer based out of New York City, and I specialize in fashion photography. Mainly on location, and I also do studio shoots as well. A lot of it is for, lookbooks for designers, campaigns, social media campaigns, promotional materials, all that good stuff.
Awesome. And how did you get into photography, specifically fashion photography, in the first place?
It's kind of a funny story. Basically, it sort of found me, which is really interesting. I always enjoyed fashion photography when I was younger in school, but never really pursued it all the way until I moved to New York about 6.5 years ago. And it just kind of started happening. It's funny because I started, doing more wedding and portraiture photography and moving into product photography. And then I did sports. And so I've kind of done various different kinds of photography. But then when I moved to New York, I became friends with a lot of really talented, amazing designers and people within the fashion industry. And they introduced me to it. And I just started doing some of their shoots and lookbooks, and now I'm shooting fashion all the time, and I love it. It's been great.
That's really cool. And Fashion Week just wrapped up. Were you there in New York? Did you do any shows?
I unfortunately didn't. I just got back into the country, so I know I missed the last two, which is kind of a bummer. Yeah. So I'm hoping in September I'll be here in town to catch some shows.
Cool. Well, there are always more, and hopefully this fall it lines up. So I'd love to kind of talk a little bit about designers out there who are maybe ready to or thinking about working with a photographer. Maybe they've got their first round of samples in. When can you kind of walk us through the best process that a designer would go through to start talking to someone like you and what that whole journey might look like?
Yeah, of course. Would love to. So essentially the designer should have a pretty good idea and concept of what they want their shoot to look like in the end. Or just some keywords or just some sense of an idea of what they're trying to go for and, what their line is about, and putting together some ideas for that. And then what's a really good idea for them is to even go on Instagram or Pinterest and start finding images that they really are pulled to, and they're like, oh, this is what I can see my clothes in, or this is what I can see my line in, and really start to kind of essentially put a mood board together. And that way, when they're looking for photographers, maybe they find a few on Instagram or, word of mouth, or if they're even on a bigger level through agencies. And this way they have an idea of the kind of style that they're going for, because every photographer has their unique style. So they need to make sure whoever they're going to get is aligned with the style that they're trying to capture and depict with their line of clothing.
Okay, and so that starts, like you said, first them gathering their inspiration, like what do they kind of envision the end product looking like, and then seeing if that even lines up with the photographer's portfolio online. So there's kind of your first step.
Yeah, and I think that's really important for designers to do. And then just setting up starting up the dialect and conversation. And it's always, I personally love to meet with designers person to person, over a cup of coffee, just to get a sense of their style and what they're going for and their personality and their aesthetic. And like I said, having those even like 3 key words of the mood that they're trying to depict in their lookbook, or if it's a campaign shoot or something, is always super, super key and helpful.
Right, because... Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry, go ahead.
I mean, I was just going to say, because you could say, like, okay, my 3 words might be sexy, provocative, and risky versus calm, subdued, and relaxed.
Exactly.
Like, immediately is a very different experience and feeling and vision.
Yeah, exactly. And this just helps narrow down the bandwidth of concepts and ideas, because I work with a lot of designers on, creative directing and conceptual development. If it's a campaign shoot, if it's deeper than a lookbook, basically.
Okay. And so for people out there listening who might not know the exact difference between what lookbook photography is going to be versus campaign photography, can you explain that?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. So lookbook is essentially exactly what it sounds like. It's just depiction of their clothing line. So you have the full length, front, back, side, 3/4, maybe some detail shots, and it's strictly for their website, or they can also use it for Instagram, but it's pretty basic. It's in studio typically. I've done a couple of lookbooks outside of studio, but that's, again, getting more towards campaign. And campaign is going to be more conceptual development, more along the lines of an advertising type shoot. So there's a lot more elements and factors that play into it.
Yeah, so like more thinking you're trying to portray the lifestyle and an experience with the product versus just showing the product for what it is.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Okay, so let's say, and maybe these are 2 different sort of scenarios, because if I'm coming to you for a lookbook versus I'm coming to you for a campaign, that could, that process sounds like it would be very, very different. So what do you think would be the most...
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, what would be the most relevant, do you think, to kind of talk through? I think the campaign is a little bit more fun, but maybe more realistic might be the lookbook. What do you think is the best to kind of talk through first?
Probably the lookbook. If it's an up and coming designer and it's their first shoot that they're working towards, or first line that they have that's coming out, I would say a lookbook would be really beneficial, because this way they can do printouts, They can do, marketing materials with them. They can do anything with them, but also it's very clear depiction of their line.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think that's going to be really helpful for them in the end. And this way, if they're selling on a mass market, if they're selling to boutiques or stores, it's just a clear picture of the clothing.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with a campaign type shoot, it's going to be more about capturing the mood and the lifestyle essence of the product, which is what you had just said. So
okay,
I would say lookbook is definitely would be a good start.
Okay,
for
so
sure.
let's start with that. So if I'm thinking I'm ready to do my lookbook shoot, what do I probably need to have? Like a finished set of samples that look accurate to the finished product.
Yes.
Okay. And
Definitely.
then what else?
That's always a good start.
Yeah.
I would. And casting is really important. So think about how many models you're going to want to have, hair, makeup, all that stuff.
Okay.
And, having also realizing what your budget is and what you can afford to do and how many looks are you trying to shoot as well.
Okay.
So, like, for example, on a typical day in the studio for a lookbook shoot, you can probably get 12 really great looks in a day, maybe more, depending on how much you're doing, and how many different, perspectives, and if the model's turning, if you're doing back, front, side,
Sure.
all that good stuff. So just having a clear-cut idea and being realistic about it as well.
Okay.
And the number one, most important thing that I always tell designers and clients is that it's quality over quantity. So making sure that we get what they need in the end. That's like the most important aspect.
Yeah.
So definitely not overloading in shots and, realizing exactly what you need to cover.
Okay. And can we talk a little bit about models? Because this is some experience that I've had firsthand. I think that it can seem really easy or tempting, maybe is a better word, for a designer who's on a budget, which I absolutely respect, to just get a friend to be the model. And I've seen things go okay, and I've seen things go very badly when this happens. And I think it goes back to what you said with, like, you could get 12, maybe more shots in a day, but I would throw in a qualifier there of, like, two things. One, you have the right photographer, and two, your model knows how to perform. Because I've seen some nightmare things. So I don't.
Key.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. It's actually it's an ongoing problem. And there's so many moving elements to make a successful shoot. And having a really great model is so key. And a lot of people, clients, and up-and-coming companies and designers really just want to, they'll be like, oh, I'll go to Model Mayhem and grab a model. And it's so hard to get lucky with that and actually get somebody really great and that fits your need and your style, because every model has a certain style too and look to them. So you could have one model. I had a shoot in the past before that we got this one model to come in from an agency, and she's great, looks great, but you know what? She wasn't right for the shoot. And that's what happened. So really the model is so, so important, because you could have an amazing photographer, amazing hair and makeup, beautiful clothes, and the model, it just falls flat.
Yeah.
There's no, it's just not working. And it's so frustrating. And it's really, really tough on the photographer to try to get good shots out of it, because it's like I say when I'm on set and this happens, like pulling teeth, or pulling hair. It's very, very difficult. So, yeah, my biggest advice to any up and coming designers is to really, really pay attention to the models and don't cheap out on them. Just have a casting call and, just spend half a day with models coming in and out and really, really look at them. Have the photographer there. It's like one of my biggest things is I really always love to be doing the casting because I know on my end who's going to work and who's not.
Yeah.
And it's also the connecting. Like I like to connect to my models when I'm shooting them, and the photographer is the only one who's going to know if that's going to happen or not. And if that magic happens. I mean, I know for lookbook it's a bit more basic, but still you still need that. You need that magic still. And the photographer will know, okay, these are up and coming models as well. Maybe the agency is working on their portfolio and they need some shots and this is perfect. So they're giving us some models to use for the day, which is great, which has happened to me in the past. But having that casting call is so key because you can look at their portfolios online and be like, oh, I love this one. This one is definitely it. And then you get to set and it's not at all. It's actually the other model that you didn't think. So you really never know. So having a casting is really important. It's huge. And I think that can make or break a shoot for sure. So that could be that's my biggest advice as far as models go, is just don't cheap out. Don't, unless your friend is an amazing working model, I would suggest to really actually, go to some agencies and do some castings and yeah.
Yeah, it's such smart advice because like I said, I've seen it happen firsthand. And what made me think of that was you made the comment of, okay, you could get 12 shots in a day in the studio and that sounds great, but let's say you invest in the hair and makeup, you invest in the photographer, and then you skimp on the model. Well, at the end of the day, you may only wind up with like 3 shots. Seriously.
Exactly.
And so then now you're looking at 4 days of work, and it's you wind up spending so much more money in the long run, and you still just barely get what you need. So I love that you emphasize this so much. The other thing I have to throw in this personal story on doing the in-person casting is I was casting models for a runway show, and it was off. I had to travel to it, and we weren't able to do a casting. And the guy showed up, and he was supposed to be a 30-inch waist, and he had put on a few pounds, and the shorts literally wouldn't button, and so we had to like just safety pin them and wear his shirt untucked, which was not how it was supposed to look. So sometimes, yeah, and it didn't match up to his what do you call it? His card, or I don't even I can't think of
the comp card.
Yeah. So I had to throw that out there, the importance of doing it in person, because sometimes what you see online is a world of difference when you see it in real life.
Oh, definitely. I actually have a similar story with a model that showed up on set. This was several years ago, and and here we are. I'm working with an up and coming designer. There's like next to no budget, and so we're trying to just get model. This is why I bring up model mayhem. You have to be so careful. And so here we are, we're browsing through model mayhem, and we're doing our casting online. and we see this one model and like, oh yeah, she's great. She's got a really good look to her and blah, blah, blah. And we always ask, especially when you're doing this online thing, you always ask to make sure, how old are they? You double check all that information.
Yeah.
And so everything was fine. Everything looked great. Everyone's on the same page. We're good. We all show up to set, and there's this older lady that's there and this like younger girl. And she's like, hi, yeah, this is my daughter, so-and-so, and from Model Mayhem. And I was like, what?
She's like a child.
And the girl smiles, and and she's got braces.
Oh my god!
And I'm just like, oh no! And I looked at the designer, and I was like, I was like, never again. I'm never going back on Model Mayhem.
Wait, so what did you guys do? I just have to know what your solution was.
We were in a bind because basically it was the only day we could shoot. We
Yeah.
only had certain models that were booked, and budget was extremely tight. And it was just, we were in such a bind. And I was like, okay, how old are you? She told me she was 15, going to be 16 soon. I was like, okay. And I just turned around to the designer. I was like, you know what? I was like, we can make this work. She won't smile. Like we can come up with solutions. I'll use some more dramatic lighting on her to make her appear a little bit older.
Yeah.
And, you know, all this stuff, and just with makeup and hair. And it was just it was such a shocking surprise. And so, yeah, that's another tale of casting in person. Super important.
I love it. What a story. Oh boy. Okay, so do your casting in person. Don't skimp on your models, because that can just make everything else you've invested in actually kind of be a waste.
Yep.
And are there any
Definitely.
places that you think you could maybe cut corners? Like, can you have your friend do the makeup and hair if, like, she's just good and she'll do it as a favor? Like, how does that typically work out if I'm really trying to save?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. I think makeup is very important. I don't think any designer should skimp with the makeup. I've had, in the beginning of my career, literally have had terrible makeup experiences with certain makeup artists. And just because, you know, we're cutting corners, so we're using people that are still in school and still learning, which can be fine, totally, especially in the beginning of your career. But it's become so messy. And I mean, I've spent literally hours upon hours in post-production just fixing makeup.
Yeah. So then talk a little bit about, like, what can happen on the back end, because then someone's going to wind up paying for all that editing.
Yeah. And that's exactly what happens, is that you end up, instead of saving money, you end up spending more money, because you have to pay for retouching and editing, and retouching is not cheap. And it's very time consuming, especially if it's bad makeup, and if the skin, you know, doing skin retouching is a major big job. So it's not cheap, it's not easy, especially if, you know, you're going for a high end look, and you don't want to just make their skin look like glass, which I've seen some other people do in the past. It's not a good look. Yeah. So yeah, makeup is really important. It's very, you really should not skimp out on makeup. I hate to say it, but it's true. And there's so many talented makeup artists out there that you can find someone good. And, you know, depending on what the shoot is, if it's for lookbook, usually you can get a pretty, you know, it's usually not super, super expensive for a really talented makeup artist. But yeah, and also going to the schools though too, and talking with other industry professionals and getting recommendations from them. I mean, that's how I found a lot of really talented, great makeup artists, is through that. Just talking with other people and, you know, seeing who they've worked with and going that route. And then also, but if you want to save, I mean, this is what I do on tight budget shoots, is sometimes I'll ask the makeup artist to see if she can do the hair, or if they can do the hair as well, which is good and bad. It saves money, but it makes it so you actually lose time on set.
Oh, right.
So, yeah, so there's that balance. It's depending what, you know, do you need all these shots? Then, well, you should just probably have someone else do hair, or see if the makeup artist can pay for an assistant to do the hair. So that would be the only thing I think where you could possibly save on, is with the hair, depending on what your final outcome is. And if it's just really easy hair, you can get away with doing stuff like that for sure. Okay. But if you're in your mind, if you're thinking some extravagant updos and you know, all these hair extensions or something, then obviously you can't cut corners with hair. So
right. It really depends on your end look.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. Okay, so all really, really great advice and tips on the lookbook stuff. Anything else to like be best prepared for the day? So I've got my model, I've got my photographer, I've got hair and makeup figured out, and I've got all my clothes are ready. Like any other tips to be best prepared to make the day go really smoothly?
Yeah, have a clear shot list printed out. Have everything mapped out. I mean, I do a lot of pre-pro books for some of my shoots just for myself because it keeps you organized and on track throughout the shoot day. So, I mean, I love to map out like, okay, we're going to be shooting look one at 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. and we're allowing 30 minutes for this shot and then, 10 minutes for the change, and really kind of just breaking it down time-wise, because then you get a clear idea of how you're going throughout the day. You're like, oh, no, it's 1 p.m. and we're still on shot 3, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's super helpful to have that breakdown and that shot list there to realize, like, what are your expectations? How are you doing time-wise? Do we need to speed things up, or are we doing good? Can we maybe do an extra shot, or it's that whole thing. So it's really helpful to have a shot list outlined out, and just for everyone to be on the same page. And also, as far as hair and makeup goes too, the other thing I can say is that when you're putting that mood board together for your ideas, or even just for lighting and color as well, but for hair and makeup, to have clear ideas of how you're wanting the makeup to be, what you're wanting, to match up with your line. Because otherwise, if you just get to set and kind of like, oh, well, I guess you can do it sort of loose and I don't know, just whatever you think. It never pans out the way you want it. It's just not. I've been on sets before where that's happened, and it's like, and I'm setting up lighting, and then I turn around and I see like what just went down, and I'm like, no, they did not just do that.
The word or the phrase "just make the makeup and hair natural" means very different things to very different people. Because I've seen the natural look done to a way where I am like, oh boy, that's a lot of eyeliner and fake eyelashes for natural. And you're like, take it off.
Yeah. Or they're, wait, did you do her makeup?
You didn't do it yet, right?
Right? Yeah, wait, you still got to do the under eyes, right?
Yeah.
What's happening?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I love that clarification of like, yeah, you have the picture because it's so easy. You can't interpret. Like you can say, sure, the initial direction, like I think you said when we were talking with the photographer, okay, my 3 words are, sexy, risky, provocative. I'm looking at a picture on your website, which I kind of like falls into that category. That's why I keep saying those words. But that's one thing to sort of start with that. But that's such a great point that like when it really comes down to like, okay, we're going to be putting the makeup on right now, have that picture because those 3 words or that description or just do what you think is going to probably not get you what you want.
It's not. No, it never does. I've seen it in the past. It never works out in the end. It's so having that mood board for just all those items for hair, makeup, and mood is so key into getting what you want in the end. And this way, everyone's aware, everyone's on the same page creatively, and it's good for everyone to give their creative input while on set or before the shoot happens, but for the designer just to have clear ideas as to like, this is what I'm trying to capture with this lookbook shoot. Mm-hmm. These are some of the hair ideas that I like. I just want straight ponytail back, really clean, crisp. That's it. And this is the makeup. I want, a heavy eye and like barely their lip. Just stuff like that is so key for just everything to run really smoothly when on set.
Yeah. And I love that you brought up the shot list because I think that's and that you said you like outline it exactly like 20-minute slots, 30-minute slots. Like, what are we going to be doing? So you can measure, like, oh God. And I that's how I've always done my shoots, with a spreadsheet. But it's scary. And I'm sure you've seen this. Like, I've done some shoots with some pretty big brands where you show up and I had the shot list because I was kind of helping coordinate, but then their artistic director was there and just went off on his own tangent. The next thing you know, it's 2 p.m. We've got one shot done, and I'm like, shot list, like weird. I mean, and sometimes they don't care, and whatever, you figure it out. You extended a day, you scramble the last minute, like. But I think it's so important to do that and to really have it's scheduled out, like, okay, we're going to do this outfit, and it makes sense to change this top, but keep these bottoms. Like, this is the most efficient way in the order, and like really map it out, all the details.
Yeah. Especially if you're going to be changing hair and makeup too. Sometimes like we build like, okay, well, we're obviously going to do these looks first because her hair is going to be down, or these are the more casual looks, and then we'll get more into evening wear, or if that's the case. So yeah, it's super smart to plan it all out, and yeah, I've been on sets before where either even us photographers can go off on tangents, and you just need that that person back there, whether it's the producer or even the designer if it's a small shoot, just to kind of crack the whip and be like, okay, let's reel it back in.
Yeah, awesome. I love that. Okay, so anything else you want to add on the lookbook stuff, or I think it's a good time to maybe talk about on location, which I think, or as you said, maybe more campaign type of stuff, which can throw in a lot of new variables to think about.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that pretty much. Oh, actually, the only other thing I can add to, and this goes with any shoot, whether it's lookbook or campaign location type shoots, is also to have a mood board for post-production, which deals with the output, the color correction, and all that stuff, whether it's any kind of particular retouching, color correction. It's so important to know that stuff as well beforehand, just to have a clear idea, like, okay, I want warm tones in the highlights, and the shadows I want to be in the cool side, and I really want to kind of get this like sort of film cross-processy look or whatever. But just to have those ideas is really important, because that's a huge factor. And a lot of people kind of forget about post until it comes up after the shoot, and they're like, oh yeah, post-production, right.
Yeah. And I think like that can be a hard thing for the average person to pick out. Like the average person, I don't know, I wouldn't necessarily say I want the warm tones here and the cool tones here. Like, we might not know that much, but
just having that mood board.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, that's key. Just to have some inspiration shots available to show to the photographer, whoever is going to be doing post, is so helpful.
Cool, I love it. Okay, so now we're talking about campaign and on location, and this throws a lot of variables into the mix, because you may be outside, you may be in a facility where you're trying to maneuver with other people there, or you're trying to block off a location for an afternoon. So, like, where do we even start with this?
Ooh, yeah, it's a big undertaking with location shoots, and it's my favorite type of shoot. There's so many fun challenges, and it's always exciting. So basically, let's say you pick the photographer, you have your concept or your keywords. Now you're sitting down with, if you don't have a creative or art director, you're sitting down with the photographer, going over things and just narrowing down locations. So like, for example, I kind of want to get that New York City street vibe, which is totally doable, and you don't necessarily need permits. It depends on, you could guru shoot it. So it's the very fine line of what you can and cannot do, especially in New York City. I know other cities are different, and you really need to look up their guidelines for permits and when you should have a permit. I know in LA it's a lot more strict than New York. So that's an important thing to know and be aware of, because you definitely don't. I've literally gone on sets before where I was told we had permits and come to find out they didn't get the permit.
Oh boy.
And we were kicked out. So you really need to know, like, okay, I need a permit if I want to shoot here.
Yeah.
So do your research, and figure out what you can afford within budget. And
Are
if you
permits pretty costly?
they can be, yes.
Like, can you throw out a range?
There's like this one spot outside, like an outdoor location on state land, can run you. I mean, this is more on the inexpensive side, so it can be $300 to $500 for a permit. And then there's other places, like, for example, botanical gardens or places like that can typically run pricier, depending on. And then you're also constricted with time too. So whereas an outdoor location, you have a little bit more flexibility with your time. You have like a day basically. So yeah, it's really all in terms of what you're trying to achieve and what's in your budget and what's feasible in the end. But yeah, so do your research and make sure that you have what you need to be able to be on set and get the shots that you need to get. So that's number one, is narrowing down locations, figuring out what you need. If you need a permit, in most cases you will need permits. It's always the safest way to go. So just plan on budgeting for that. And then the other thing is logistics. It's always interesting to figure out, okay, so do we have like a home base? Are we just running around rampant in the city? Or are we, it's figuring out the logistics and time, basically proficiently managing your time is so imperative. And this is where the shot list really comes in handy. So it's not only are you budgeting costs, but you're budgeting time. I've had clients in the past before that just couldn't wrap their head around that it's going to take 15 minutes, maybe 10 minutes for an outfit change. It's like, you have to allot for outfit changes, hair and makeup touch-ups if you're not going to do makeup changes, or if you're just going to change a lip, or you have to allow for all these different things to happen. And there's also, if you're shooting in a public space, like I've shot on New York City streets before, it can be crazy. And you really need to figure out, okay, so if I'm going to be on this street in Soho, what is the best time for me to be shooting there, on Mott Street or wherever? It's definitely not going to be during the day when everyone's running around. So you really need to work that into. You need to realize, like, if you're in a public space, you need to go when there's not going to be a million people around you. So you have to also be aware of that factor. Let's see if I'm forgetting anything else here. That's huge right there. And yeah, home base. Where are you going to change? I was working with this one client where it was kind of brilliant. She had, when you're doing these location shoots, you really need a team of people. You need a lot of helping hands, assistants, just with changing the model. And this one shoot I was on, they had a changing tent, a fold-up changing tent.
Oh, like a little pop-up thing.
Yeah. And it was brilliant. It was just like, okay, next look. And they would just go and they had everything organized. So they would just go in there, look for, would be ready, passing on to the model. They'd go in the tent, change, come out, hair and makeup would just do little touch-ups, and it was good. It was just brilliant.
Yeah.
And that's key, is being realistic and also being prepared. And realizing that, if you're going to be shooting in that type of environment, that there's all these factors that could happen that you can't even plan for, such as weather, And, you can't plan for the weather. I've been lucky more than not, but there's been times where shoots been canceled because it's downpouring outside. So you always have to plan for a rain date. Always have a rain date and just in everyone's schedule, they should be holding for a rain date. And just in case, because you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah. One thing I will throw out, and I've been lucky more than not as well with the weather, but a few steps back that you were talking about, just being prepared and planning and having a small team of people. One thing someone taught me way back, which was like the most priceless advice ever when it comes to your shoot running smoothly, is so you've done a good job. You've got the right photographer that you know and you trust, and you've got the model and they've got good rapport. And I think at some point you can let them do their work and always. And I say you may be the designer, you may be the coordinator or the assistant, whatever, but somebody has to always be thinking about the next shot. You can't get so absorbed in the current shot that, then it's done and you're like, don't have the outfit ready, or it's not steamed, or some variable. Exactly. It's always be thinking about the next shot. And sometimes I found it's best to leave the photographer and model to like do their magic and get the next shot ready. And trust that that's going to go well.
Yeah. And that's my thing of, it's so good to have some assistants or helping hands on set just to even prep that next shot for you. Because I think it's really good to have the designer or, the client with you while you're shooting, because sometimes there are certain details that I will miss for the clothes. Like maybe, this one piece just keeps on flipping up from the wind, what have you. And I'm paying attention to everything else. I'm not worrying about a little piece of fabric flipping up, but to the designer, that could be huge. That could be a really big deal, make or break for their shot.
Sure.
So having them on set and being very present during the shoot, I find it always works better, because there's stuff that, I might miss, and they'll be paying closer attention to their clothing.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important, whether it's them or it's somebody they trust, to be present, whichever. But I think that's really good. And also at the same time, allowing the photographer to get in the flow and the groove with the model.
Yeah.
Because you never want to be that one to like break up the flow, and it's always like, no, get out of my
shot. Okay, so on that note, do you ever have a client or designer or someone who, they have this inspiration picture and they want it to be just like this?
Yes.
Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's always like, it's kind of always a bummer when that happens. I get it though, they fell in love with the shot and that's what they want. And so for me, it's like, okay, I can do that for you. If that's what you're wanting, I can totally capture that for you. But I also think we should also capture some other things too. So when I'm on set, and maybe I don't even say that to them, and so when I'm on set, I'll capture that moment that they're looking for, and they'll pull up the photo and they'll look at it, and then they'll look at the back of the camera, the computer screen, and be like, yeah, or no, it's not quite there yet. Maybe just a little lower in angle.
And her elbow needs to be just a bit over here, like 2 inches to the left.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm just like, all right, no worries, we'll get it. And then once we get it, I'll be like, okay, let me just have a few more minutes with this look. I just want to capture something else that caught my eye that I think would be super cool, that you would really love.
Yeah.
And once you know, you get to know your client and the designer, and as a photographer, that's what you should be doing. And you kind of, their aesthetic and what they're going for. And so when you're on set, you can sort of maneuver that and capture something extra that they probably wouldn't have seen or didn't know or didn't realize would be cool. And so it's always good to, yes, get what they want, but then also like have a little fun and show them some other stuff that they could possibly like. So that's what I try to do in those situations. This way everyone kind of walks away happy and it's all good and they have extra.
Yeah. No, I think that's such a great point though. Because I don't know what your experience has been, but whenever I've seen people try to like replicate this exact shot, like down to the T, they are like, wait, no, move her hand like an inch over. Those shots tend to feel like really stiff and structured. Yeah.
Yeah. They never feel natural. They always feel forced. So, and sometimes, I mean, people are stubborn. So they can be stubborn and that's what they want. And they can't see outside of that until they get that. And then once they get that, they're like, okay, all right, cool. Let's move on. And it's like, wait, no, let's just do this real quick. Like I saw the light was catching the fabric. It looked really cool. Let me just shoot it and show you.
Yeah.
And so that's when it's always working with the personalities too. And it's a good balance. It's like, okay, make them happy, and it can be very frustrating to match a shot as well, which I know, but it's just breathe through it, get it. And I mean, you can never get anything to match exactly. Mm-hmm. And that's another thing, and I think that should be a meeting before the shoot as well. If there is a shot that they're wanting to be exactly the same, then just also the photographer should be responsible and just be like, I will do my best to capture that, but I don't think we'll be able to get it exactly like that, but let's try it out. Let's do our best and go from there.
Yeah. Okay. So many different moving pieces and parts for On Location. Like just as a comparison, you said if we're in studio doing really simple lookbook shots, maybe in a good average day, we can get 12. And I know there's so many variables because you're like, well, are we doing 3 locations? Or let's say we're going to stay in a New York City street area and use like the same few blocks or so. We're not like getting in cars and driving to different places. Right. What is a fair expectation of getting a campaign or on location shots in roughly one location for a day?
I would say I would allow for at least an hour per look. Mm-hmm. And that's not including changes or anything like that, or walking to a different block. That's just strictly shooting, only because there are so many moving variables to shooting on a street, especially in New York City. There's always going to be, cars, pedestrians, and maybe there'll be some people in the background out of focus at work, but maybe not, so there's so many variables. And so I would definitely, you have to allow for double the time or more.
Okay.
And also too, if there's more than one model, that's a whole nother, because now you're getting, and this is the other thing that a lot of people tend to forget, is when you're working with just one model, it's easier, you just have that one model. They're just focusing on them, and they're it's just them in the shot. When you put another model in, or even another one, that's when it gets really tricky, and there's even more moving variables. So you really need to allow plenty of time. So in those cases, I would say at least 2 hours per shot. So a lot of people forget that, oh yeah, it's like, you have all these models in the shot. It's like one's looking that way, and it's really weird, and that girl's making a funny face. I'm like, what is that guy doing? He looks like a stalker back there, So yeah, you really need to be aware and just allow plenty of time to get that shot when there's multiple models involved.
Yeah. And you really kind of have to think about like the dynamics and the rapport between them, because that is just as important as the dynamic and the rapport between the model and the photographer. If not, maybe even more. Yes,
agreed. And that all comes back to casting. So basically, circling back to the lookbook, everything that we had talked about with the lookbook shoot all goes into these shoots as well.
Yeah.
It's just there's more factors because you're talking about different locations and et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, casting is huge. And especially if you're casting for multiple models, you need to make sure they're all going to jive. And, you know, maybe they've worked together in the past. That's always a plus. You can look at their shots together in the past or cast them together. And yeah, so it's definitely, I mean, yeah, circling back to casting, very important.
Yeah. The upfront work will save you so much in the long run.
So much. And it just makes the shoot go so much smoother and better. And it allows for the creativity to flow more as well. So it's just so key to get all these parts established and moving well before you get on set.
Yeah. Okay. I have I have a few last questions. One last question about sort of the, either the campaign or the lookbook shots, but has anybody ever done anything that's like really stood out as super prepared? Like, God, this person is a pleasure to work with. Everything goes so smoothly. It's super organized. Like any, like really big tips for people to just really kill it and have an awesome day.
Yeah, definitely. I would say, you know, I love when clients come on set, and this is talking like smaller shoots, if the client is the designer and there's no producer involved. When they come on set I love seeing the printed mood boards. I love seeing those shots printed out because no one ever tries to pull it up on their phone and look while they're on set. Never happens, ever. So it makes me super happy to see that stuff printed out for everyone to see, including models, because that's another huge thing is models need to have the mood board. I mean, I've been to sets before where I've sent everything to the agency and the mood board, everything, and then the agency never sent them to the model.
Yeah.
So the models show up and have no clue what's going on. But fine, okay, let's have printed mood boards. Let's have all that stuff printed out, shot list, everything. So that always makes me so happy to see. And also when the shot list is clearly outlined with time slots and like, okay, so we're doing, so-and-so with look 1 and then pairing her up with so-and-so in look 5 and like everything's on hangers, everything's labeled, everything's been pre-steamed. You know, of course you're going to have to do some stuff on set, but everything is just so organized. You have the hair and makeup all figured out. Nothing's a guessing game when you get to on set.
Yeah.
And then also when it's that organized, then things sort of happen organically out of that. And it's just, there's no stress. So then everyone's on the same page creatively and then things just start to happen organically. It's like, it's just so much better when that all is organized and upfront and everyone knows it. So yeah, the biggest advice is, coming to set with all these items prepared.
Perfect. I love it. I've always showed up. I always create 2 binders, just duplicates, but a binder with like sheet protectors and it has got all the stuff in there and it kind of has the outfits like mocked up, like the order they're going in. And then if there's any inspiration for that shot, like you can open up to that page and you can look, okay, here's the outfit on the left. I know what model is. I know what time slot this should be on the right. Here's kind of the rough inspiration. And then like you just take a Sharpie throughout the day and you cross big X's like right on the sheet protectors and you just flip to the next one and then you've got your hangers and they have, I've even gone so far as sometimes put the sheet protector with the inspiration, with the outfit and the model over the hanger, and it's all in order on the rack, and it does, you're right, it goes beautifully. It's a fun day. The creativity gets to be like what drives everything, and it's, you're not scrambling like, wait, what's next? Wait, what is this one supposed to look like?
Oh, wait, this was supposed to go with this. Oh, no, we have to reshoot it.
Or you even, like, get to the end of the day, and they're like, wait, we forgot that entire shot.
Yeah, which has happened so many times. Like, oh, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think coming prepared with all that is is awesome and just always makes me happy, and it makes every photographer happy because it's just, it makes the day go by so much smoother. And there was also another thing too that I just remembered that I wanted to bring up. Okay, I can't. Oh, it'll come to me again. Sorry, I just lost
okay.
it.
I'm gonna throw a comment at you, and I'm just waiting for you to chuckle. But I have to hear your thoughts and give everybody your 2 cents on this. How do you feel about the line? Oh, we'll just Photoshop it.
Oh, God. It kills a piece of me every time. There's not much left to me. It's so crazy. I think almost every shoot I hear that, and I'm like, actually, no, we're not. We're not gonna do now. I'm like, no, we're not gonna do that. Let's get it right.
Just for fun.
So
sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just so funny. I was just thinking this last shoot I was on, it was like there was some kind of item, a piece of something that was in the shot that we needed help removing. And they're like, you can just Photoshop it. Just Photoshop it. And I'm just like, no, let's actually just wait 5 minutes and get it removed.
Yeah, it'll be way faster to spend 5 minutes on it now than photoshopping it later.
Yeah, it's just, that's not the fix-all. I mean, people really need to understand that you should always get it in camera, and anything in post should just be an enhancement to the beauty that you captured within camera.
Yeah. What's your, so I was going to say a second ago, just for fun, like, do you have a funny, really extreme Photoshop incident that you just had to make happen?
Oh, so many. I mean, especially in the beginning of my career, when you're learning and you don't know all these like pro tips. I not casting for shoots at all, just showing up to a set, not even knowing who I was shooting, and then getting there and being like, oh boy, and just literally photographing and being like, none, like she's not even a model, like, she's a beautiful person, just not, this is not happening right now. And doing just some crazy photoshopping, like elongating necks and doing just like crazy stuff that, I mean, for me, there's a point when it's like, okay, the problem is that the client expected model type, like, high fashion model type photographs, and unfortunately they didn't cast properly.
Yeah.
And when they saw the pictures, they're like, oh no, this is not going to be good. So we need to do retouching. Can you do it? And it's like, well, yeah, but it's going to be crazy. And it's just, it goes to that whole thing about having a photographer cast for the models. And I've done just some crazy retouching on people, and they were friends. It was just friends that came in. So yeah, that was intense. That was like several days of really intense photoshopping. And I'm like, nope, never again.
And you start having nightmares about the clone stamp tool.
And yeah, and you're like, liquefy. No, I don't ever want to liquefy anything ever again.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Okay, did you think of the thing you were going to mention earlier?
I didn't. It'll come to me like in 5 hours. And I'll be like, oh.
Okay. Well, you could shoot me an email and I'll include it in the show notes.
Okay. Cool.
Okay, this has been so much fun. I don't know if I've laughed this much on an episode, genuinely.
Well, that's great.
Yeah, it is really great.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
So, 2 last things. One is, where can everybody find you online and reach out to you if they may need a photographer for their project?
Definitely. Visit either my Instagram page at kwaltherphoto and also my website, KristenWaltherPhotography.com. And my email's on both pages. So yeah, please feel free to shoot me a text. My number's on there too, or an email.
Awesome. And I'll link to that in the show notes. And then I'll ask you the question that I ask everybody at the end of the interview. And that is, what is one thing people never really ask you about working in the fashion industry that you wish they would ask you?
So there's like more than one thing, but I have to say that the one thing is, and I don't know if this is actually answering your question, but basically working with your typical, like the stereotypical model. And, it's come up a lot lately, and it's definitely over the years has begun to kind of grate on me about the body type and what's socially acceptable, in our society for being, beautiful or being used for fashion shoots and et cetera, et cetera. And getting as a normal, woman in this society, it's like, I can't wear that stuff. It's like I'm shooting all these pictures of, they look gorgeous in the shots and the clothes, fit them great because they're literally like hangers. I mean, that's what it comes down to. But it's like, I could never wear those dresses or those clothes. And so a lot of people sometimes ask me like, oh, you should get that. Like, oh, that's such a cool look. Like, and it's like, actually, that's not wearable. Like, I can't actually wear that. And they're trying to sell it as wearable clothing. So my thing is I really want to work with more versatile body shapes, and that's kind of been a big thing for me as of lately, and just making that become more of a norm in our society. So that's one thing I guess people don't, literally have been starting to talk about within this past year.
Right.
But as photographers, I think it's our duty and responsibility to help push it. Yeah, that would be one thing. I don't know if that directly.
No, that was great.
Looking for.
No, that was great. And I think such a great point to bring up. And like you said, as the photographer, you can maybe help have that dialogue a little bit more openly with the designer, because maybe they just didn't even think about it, because it's easy to fall into the stereotypical model trap. But like you said, it has come up a lot more in the past year or so. So have you been seeing like some of the up and coming designers you've been working with, like initiating that a little bit more? Or
a little bit more, which has been great. I've been working with some plus size models and just models of various different sizes. And, there's some clients that really strictly want your, very skinny runway type model.
Sure.
And it's always that push and play, like, oh, well, why don't we have a couple looks, doing this and try. I always try to work it in, and but yeah, it's starting to slowly happen. But I definitely think as a photographer, it's kind of our responsibility to help push it even further.
I love that. No, great point, and great note to end on. Kristen, this has been tremendously fun, seriously.
Oh, thank you. Yes, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. And I will link to your site so everybody can see the great work you do and reach out if they need some services. Thank you so much. It was great having you on the show.
Thank you. Talk soon.
Thank you so much for the interview, Kristen. It was really great to chat with you. I also want to share that she did email me with the last point she couldn't remember at the end of the interview, so I'll share it with you here. Kristen says, if you're shooting in the studio, it's a great idea to use a tethered camera. This is where you capture directly to the computer. It's really beneficial for the designer to have a look through the shots to make sure they're getting what they need and to make sure hair is in place and makeup is translating well with the lighting. She says, I absolutely love doing a quick recap with the designer if time allows after each look or at the end of the shoot. And with tethering the camera to the computer, it makes it super easy to do. Thanks for sending that last note in, Kristen. And thank you to you listeners so much for being here. I really appreciate each and every one of you. Again, make sure to hit subscribe on iTunes or wherever you're listening. And if you enjoyed this episode, I'd be really grateful if you'd take 30 seconds to leave a rating or review. You can do that anytime at sfdnetwork.com/review. And again, if you'd like to learn more about any of the resources mentioned in this episode, visit the show notes at sfdnetwork.com/45. Thanks so much, you guys. I'll talk to you next week.